Join Move for Meals, a month-long fitness and fundraising challenge supporting food and friends. This October, you can walk, run, or bike wherever you are to help neighbors living with serious illnesses. Every $10 you raise provides one medically tailored meal delivered right to someone's home. With weekly wellness themes and fun challenges, Move for Meals is a chance to meet your fitness goals while fueling compassion in our community. Sign up today and make every step count at p2p.onecause.com/moveformeals or visit foodandfriends.org. Hey, Bridget Todd here, co-host of CityCast DC. At CityCast DC, our mission is simple. We strive to make our listeners more engaged neighbors because we believe that better neighbors make better cities. Every day, we bring you the local stories, conversations, and tips that help you feel more connected to DC and the people and places that make it feel like home. And when you become a CityCast DC neighbor, you're investing in that mission. Your support allows us to keep covering those local issues that matter most to our communities and highlight the stories that make this city shine. Plus, CityCast DC neighbors get great benefits like ad-free podcast episodes, a weekly email rounding up a full week's worth of curated local events, invitations to members-only events, and more. Sign up today for $10 a month or $100 a year at membership.citycast.fm. Join the neighborhood. That's membership.citycast.fm, and thank you.
Today on CityCast DC, the city government actually has a way to predict pretty accurately just who is going to get into an accident. But can we get them off the road? That is the tricky part. Washington Post transportation reporter Rachel Weiner is here to explain a fascinating recent DC experiment in automotive behavior. Today is Thursday, September 25th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, before we get into the show, it's day 2 of our fall membership campaign, and I'm inviting you to support this show by joining CityCast DC neighbors at membership.citycast.fm. Listen, this is the weirdest, hardest moment in DC's political history that I've lived through, and I was born the same year Home Rule launched. And all the same, I've never felt more connected to DC and to telling local stories. So become a member for those stories, like the one you're about to hear. These are hyper-local, and sometimes, like today, they're a little bit weird. Do it for the kind of conversations we bring you at CityCast DC, where we tell the most important stories about what's happening amid the federal surge and the threat to home rule. Do it for the perks, like cool members events. You get to meet people like me, a dedicated events newsletter, and getting to shout out your favorite businesses. And if you do it for nothing else, for goodness sakes, do it for the Neighbors Make DC tote that you get only when you join during this membership campaign. Who doesn't love a tote? Actually, I've never really loved a tote, but I think this one is so cool that I may start becoming a tote guy. I'll keep everyone posted on the pod. But really, do it if you're like us and you believe in supporting work that holds our city accountable and has honest conversations about what DC gets wrong. But also if you love hearing zany, joyful stories celebrating what's truly great about life here. Our membership program is designed to help you engage more deeply with DC, and your membership keeps this whole daily conversation thriving. Seriously, we make it look easy, I know, but it is a ton of work behind the scenes, and we appreciate every bit of help we can get. It's only $10 a month or $100 for a whole year. That's like one happy hour drink or even a fancy coffee every month. Go to membership.citycast.fm right now. That's membership.citycast.fm. And now to the interview. Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Michael.
So listen, you recently wrote about some wild data about bad drivers that DC came across and that they tried to act on. This experiment began with a text. Can you, what did this text say? Can you walk me through it?
Yeah, sure. So thousands of vehicle owners in the DC area, we have to say vehicle owners and not drivers because of how they found them, but thousands of people got these texts basically telling them that they were at higher risk for a car crash than other people based on their cars' photo citations from the city. And then other people got a mailer in the mail, and then some people got both.
And then this text, what it actually said, after saying that you're at a higher risk for a car crash, it said, "For your and others' safety, drive the speed limit and stop at red lights."
Yes.
So this is, I guess, an example of the concept of nudge.
Mm-hmm.
That they plumbed their data and looked up the cars that had a lot of traffic enforcement camera violations and used an algorithm that involved like time of day and how many violations and what kind of car and stuff to determine that these 30,000 people were the ones most likely to have an accident. And then sent this to them thinking this might cause them to behave better and assuming they're the driver, either cause them to drive more safely or to be more judicious about who they loan their car to.
Mm-hmm.
Did it work?
No, it did not.
It did not. Oh, yeah. No. What went wrong?
Basically, just as you might expect if you're skeptical of these kinds of nudge efforts, the people who got the messages were as likely to get in a crash after getting them as the people who didn't.
But let's back up, because I think it's fascinating that there is, I hadn't heard of this until you reported it, the lab at DC, but that there is sort of a government adjacent organization that is able to get through data and know, I think, fairly well, because it proved out just who is likely to get in an accident.
Yeah, the lab is a cool thing, I think, that the city does, where they basically do all sorts of data-related experiments. They're doing another one right now related to camera tickets, basically, where they offer people who are low income and can prove that based on various programs they're in, one-time reduction in traffic camera fees to see whether that makes those people more likely to pay them. So basically, yeah, they use data available to the city to see whether often sort of low cost interventions can make a difference. And, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't.
Tell me, what kind of data do they have access to?
Well, so for this, they were looking at all the citation data that the city is privy to. And so they were able to cut various ways, like you said, from how many tickets someone got to the time of day or day of the week that they got them to what the tickets were for, and run all of those numbers and try to figure out which of those are most associated with actually getting into a car crash.
And they also extrapolate from the make and model of car. Like if you have a Ferrari, it's more likely that you'll speed than if you have a Prius.
No, that would have been interesting, but they did not do that. They just looked strictly at the citations that each vehicle got.
So I think this brings us back to this question that we've talked about before with you, which is, if they know that such and such a car, and therefore the person that car is registered to, is more likely to be the author of accidents, other than sort of with weird nudge texts, why can't they do stuff to get that car and its driver away from the general public?
Yeah. So first of all, like you said, they did, before they sent out the messages, they ran basically a test of the model. This actually started back in 2023. And the reason it took a couple years to come to fruition is because before sending the messages, they, put together the factors that they decided were most relevant in terms of safety. And then they said, did we pick the right factors? And to do that, they followed the drivers for a year and found that 65% of the crashes that happened in that year involved someone in their group. If you were just looking at cars with 2 or more citations, which was sort of their most simple idea, that alone would be 50%. And they did come up with like a 50 plus point model of very specific factors that might have ended up being even better than the test they ended up running, but they decided they didn't want it to be too complicated for people to understand.
Does non-payment of tickets correlate with increased likelihood to get into an accident?
That's something else that they did not study, but would be interesting for the future. But yeah, so they basically took specifically just the behavior, and there's like some interesting iterations, like people who get tickets on weekdays tend to engage in more reckless behavior than people who get tickets on the weekend.
It's like being a drug user. Like if I only smoke weed on the weekends, I'm less likely to get in trouble at work.
Maybe. I think traffic is higher during the week, so it's harder to speed than it is on the weekend, so that might be a factor. But and like you said, yeah, it might be more unusual behavior. But this is totally separate from the city's enforcement of traffic citations, which they can look at the same data. They can see how many people have this many tickets, paid or unpaid, and they've started just in the past couple of years trying to target those drivers in various ways. The main thing they can do is tow their vehicle or sue them over the unpaid tickets if they're unpaid.
Right.
The real challenge is that, including in this pilot, a camera ticket only shows you the vehicle, doesn't show you the driver. So like you said, it could be someone else driving, and that prevents any sort of more criminal or direct intervention on these things.
So basically, if you get a lot of regular moving violations, i.e. the cops pull you over and ticket you, even if you pay them all off, just like your credit card bill, you can still ultimately face trouble, like lose your license. Because these are just camera violations and it could be anyone driving your car, it's understandable that they would eliminate them from this sort of criminal violation or losing your license. But I gotta wonder if the government, the people in charge of traffic safety, know that there's 30,000 cars out there that are much more likely to hurt me or to hurt my children or to hurt some pedestrian. Can there really not be anything they can do to get them off the street, short of towing them if they happen to not pay their fines? Because there's people, again, who use it like an ATM. And wouldn't it stand to reason that if you are the registered owner of a car and we want you to not loan your car to someone who speeds all the time, we can cause you to lose your license?
Not right now. I think the city could try to connect failure to pay to driver's licenses. That's been the case in the past. But then in 2018, concerns about fairness in that, because it was based on, your ability to pay or not your behavior, led them to undo that provision. So right now what they can do is take your car, and legislation from last year does now sort of eliminate the paid or unpaid distinction. You can tow a car, DPW, the Department of Public Works, can tow a car for a certain amount of violations, whether or not they're paid. But the parking enforcement agency is not, they're not the police, they're not the Department of Transportation, they're not really set up for that kind of work. They're set up to clear the streets of vehicles that are blocking traffic or blocking street sweeping, and that's still the vast majority of what they do. Various council members have tried to get them to do more safety enforcement, and they have done a little bit, but it's still just really not their priority. It's not what they were organized around.
CityCast DC is made possible by the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University, presenting the Peabody Performance Series, a full season of free concerts at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center, located at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. The Peabody Performance Series brings one of the nation's leading conservatories to the heart of D.C., with concerts and programs spanning jazz, classical, chamber music, opera, and dance. Highlights this season include the Graduate Jazz Ensemble on October 31st, and in January, the Nexus Grant, featuring 2 masterclasses and a reception with internationally renowned conductor Marin Alsop and the National Philharmonic. While all events are free, tickets are required for entry. Explore the full performance schedule, find out more details, and reserve your tickets early at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
There is always something exciting to experience at the Library of Congress. Look at loc.gov/events, and this week alone, there are more than 15 free things to do. A talk with humor and pop science author Mary Roach, children's fantasy writer Catherine Rendell sharing her new book, a live concert of Texas Tejano and Chicano roots music, and an introduction to the library's business collections. Whether it's happy hour during Live at the Library, kid-friendly events at Family Days, or daytime programming for lifelong learners with afternoons at the library, there's a program to connect you with the library's collections. So plan your Library of Congress visit at loc.gov/events.
Don't miss Folger Theater's Julius X, playing September 23rd through October 26th at the Folger Shakespeare Library. This bold new play by Peabody Award-winning journalist Al Letson remixes Shakespeare's Julius Caesar with the history of Malcolm X, sampling lyrically and historically from Shakespeare's text, famous speeches by civil rights leaders, and Letson's own verse. Directed by DC-based theater artist Nicole Brewer and starring renowned Shakespearean actor Brandon Carter, Julius X explores the historical weight of Malcolm X's last days and the cyclical nature of ambition, power, and revolution. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by calling the box office at 202-544-7077, Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today. Hey, before we get back to the interview about this list of bad DC drivers, I've put you on a list for membership because I think you should become a CityCast DC member. One thing about local media, it is shrinking. It's shrinking everywhere, even shrinking in DC. We're much better than most around DC, as much as we complain. But there are fewer and fewer places than ever to find stories about you and the place that you live, work, and play. Support from CityCast DC Neighbors allows us to not only inform our community on important local issues, but to take delight in what's great about living here. Plus, members who join now will get a super secret invite to an upcoming event this fall. We're already planning it, and we hope you can join us. You also get a chance to shout out a place that makes DC the best. Pick a business or a nonprofit, and we'll drop a mention of it in our newsletter or on our pod. And if you're a huge newsletter event nerd, members get an extra events-only email every week. Plus, that cool tote. And a reminder, it's only $10 a month or $100 for the whole year. Go to membership.citycast.fm to join. That's membership.citycast.fm. All right, now let's get back to my conversation with the Washington Post's Rachel Weiner. So the other thing we know, in D.C., it's almost a joke among us, is a lot of the bad behaviors from people with out-of-state tags, particularly the adjoining states, Maryland and Virginia. Is there information sharing? Like if someone is racking up a lot of camera violations in D.C., does D.C. alert their home state?
No, that's a long-standing issue, is that those states just full stop will not enforce camera tickets or payment of camera tickets against their citizens. And most of the drivers in DC come from Virginia or Maryland.
So if somebody from Maryland has racked up $20,000 in unpaid tickets for camera violations, there is no ability to have consequence on them unless they come into DC?
Well, so again, just this year, because of legislation last year, the city can now sue out-of-state drivers over unpaid tickets. Mm-hmm. And they've started doing that. Those cases are very early in development, so it's hard to say yet how effective it'll be. A lawsuit is pretty time-consuming, so they're only doing a handful. But I think the hope is that it will have some deterrent effect to basically say, you thought if you just didn't park on the street in DC, you could get all these tickets and never pay them. And we're showing that actually there could be legal consequences for you.
And I would imagine it's in everyone's interest, because I assume for every lousy Maryland or Virginia driver in D.C., there's a lousy D.C. driver who goes to the suburbs that they would like to bring to heel.
Yeah, and Maryland's looked at having similar legislation and then we would sort of have a real kind of like clunky workaround version of the enforcement reciprocity that state governments are resistant to. It would be a lot easier and smoother to simply say, if you don't pay a ticket in this state, you'll face consequences in that one. But that's just been kind of a non-starter for reasons.
Another thing on the sort of fairness front, you write that more of the camera violations are in poorer neighborhoods because they're on high-speed corridors there. Is that just because poorer neighborhoods is where they stuck the highways and the other ugly stuff that people don't want in their neighborhoods? Or is it that, like, literally we have put more cameras in poorer neighborhoods?
No, I think, like you said, it's really tied to the roads that go through those neighborhoods and also the percent of people who drive. It's interesting, there's a low-income population that cannot afford a car, and then there's a high-income population that likes living without a car and is able to live in the more expensive parts of the city where you don't need them. But then the report goes into the fact that people in low-income, majority-minority areas are more likely to need to commute by car because the public transit where they live is just not as built out as it is in the central city. So part of the reason they really did not want this predictive model to be used for enforcement, even if it was possible, is that by looking just at camera tickets, they're probably capturing a disproportionately Black and low income population. And they decided that was fine for an experiment that didn't have any consequences. You know, people got the message. Some people later told researchers when they got into a crash that they were spooked by the message and it made them feel like it was fated to happen in some way. But they weren't.
Well, it is kind of a spooky message to get.
Yeah, and I guess the idea was maybe it would scare you into being more careful, but it did not. But it did scare people in a more general sense. But there are no punitive consequences for ignoring it. So I think they felt like it was okay to rely entirely on camera tickets.
Did they like
despite
A/B test the
potential
language or
equity
anything?
issues. You know, they didn't, or at least
Because
if
I
they
would
did,
imagine, like, you know, if you got one, you know, this is the government. We know that you had 7 violations in the last year. On top of the money, this means you're more likely to die or kill somebody. I mean, you could put it in a lot of ways, some of them really spooky and some of them less so.
Yeah, no, and they could, you know, they just ended this study and decided it wasn't effective, but they did say, you know, they could model more consistent warnings. I think research about traffic safety education generally finds that it's only effective if it's followed up consistently more than once. And again, like you said, if there's some element of warning that there could be consequences for not following it. And so yeah, you said these messages are spooky, but you know, just saying more likely to be in a crash is not that aggressive, right? It's not saying
No, it's not. No, I just mean that, like, getting a text out of the blue
sure.
from someone who knows your driving record
yes,
is kind of spooky.
But they could use language that's maybe more colorful or more tied to, you know, not just a crash, but to some sort of injury or death, and maybe that would be more effective.
And I guess the flip side of looking at the fairness piece is if you are taking cars away or otherwise bringing consequence to fewer drivers in poorer neighborhoods, that means you maybe care less about the pedestrians or children or whoever who might get injured in accidents in those neighborhoods.
I mean, I think no one is in favor of injuring or killing someone. I think most people, when they're driving, just...
I think that's a fair point, yes.
So, yeah, don't think it's going to happen. The people who are speeding think, you know, there aren't that many pedestrians on these roads, or like, I'll see them, and if I don't, you know, maybe it was their responsibility to get out of the way. And but like you said, yeah, the big thing is the engineering of the streets to some degree determines how fast you can go. And DC successfully kept the city from being covered in sort of overpass highways. But the compromise made there was then to have these wide arterial streets, and those now are built up with pedestrians who are interacting with cars that are really driving very fast.
Sorry, so what's the future of this? Do they have a next experiment in mind, or other stuff they may do with this data?
So like I said, they are now trying this fine reduction pilot to see if that gets people to pay traffic tickets that they otherwise would have ignored. And they are considering, you know, more research on whether more frequent messages, a message that comes in a different way with a different tone, could potentially be more effective. And it's interesting that they have developed this model that will show them, you know, a pool of people who's are more likely significantly than the rest of the population to be involved in something dangerous. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with that going forward.
So I got to ask, because you're a reporter and so am I, can we find out who's in this pool?
No, I have that. I mean, I've asked in so many ways and so many times for camera ticket license related information, and it's not been successful because of basically privacy reasons. They do not release that data, and I think are worried it would undermine support for traffic cameras if they did.
Be straight with me here, Rachel. Are you on the list?
No, I did not. Well, I guess it's impossible to say because I could have been in the control group, but I did not get a mailer or a message.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So after we recorded this, DC Attorney General Brian L. Schwalb announced that his office had actually recently secured a first-of-its-kind judgment against a Virginia driver who owed DC $77,100 for 244 traffic violations. They've got suits against 12 others. So maybe they will get some of these people off the road from out of state. And we've got a bunch of new members from our first membership day yesterday. It's officially the Cool Kids Club. Let's keep the momentum going. I can't guarantee you that it won't get you sued by the Attorney General if you rack up thousands of dollars in violations, but it will get you appreciated by us all the same. Thank you to Delonda J., Kelsey S., Addie M., Jocelyn P., Colby M., Anusha R., Molly O., Marissa H., Laura G., Heather C., Amanda S., Nora F., Lisa M., Chantal Q., Lauren M., and David R. Welcome, welcome, welcome all of y'all to the neighborhood. Remember, if you join, you get a free Neighbors Make DC tote. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend who's a bad driver? You could also tell them to maybe slow down a little bit and watch the signage. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our great morning newsletter, Hey DC. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.